So I'm gonna keep it soft in here. I hope we're all gonna graduate one day to the hardcore track. I'm Markus from Propeller Heads. If you don't know us, we've been building solvers for the last 2 years, and before that, we did a little bit of searching and backrunning for protocols, kind of like searcher for hire. And if that doesn't tell you anything, then searchers are like the guys in here, between all of the dexes and all of the people who want to trade. More and more solvers and searchers are taking care of the execution of those trades. So it's quite difficult nowadays to find a venue. And it's unlikely that you're using a venue, or the majority of you, where you don't rely on solvers. And most of DeFi execution, not just trading, but also dApps that are building on top of swap infrastructure, are relying more and more on solvers. With Phanoma and other systems, we will probably see a proliferation of that many more DeFi actions are going to turn into intents and then rely on solvers. Now, while we're all fighting quite hard for keeping the settlement layer decentralized, if we don't have a decentralized or trustless trade supply chain, then we won't have a decentralized DeFi. So all those qualities that we want to have in a settlement layer, censorship resistant, liveness, we won't have in DeFi if we don't also have it in the trade supply chain. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think this shortcuts the question: is it a problem if there are only 2 solvers? Is it a problem if there are only 2 big searchers? Is it a problem if there are only 2 builders? Yes, it is, because ultimately it makes all of DeFi more fragile and easier to censor, easier to extract from, easier to fail. And what does it look like today? I think it actually is quite bleak today. Most of the trade supply chain, and I call it a trade supply chain, not the transaction supply chain, because the trade supply chain starts much earlier. It starts at the UI. It starts even before you click swap. It starts when you are requesting for a quote. And then the quote request goes out to all solvers. Now all of these solvers are trusted to not do something with that information and front run you maybe. Also the UI, of course, and the wallet are all trusted to use that data only for your benefit. And then when we go and execute intents, or when we store intents before they get executed, we are relying on trusted order books. So all of the intent auctions that I know, they have trusted order books, centralized, sitting usually with the developer of that auction, and in many cases openly accessible also to anybody who wants to listen to that order book. Again, we're trusting that nobody who's running the order book is doing anything nefarious with it. And then solvers, we're also trusting the solvers fully. They basically see all your trade information. Even if it's a private order book, they see all your trade information before they solve and then help you execute that order. Again, fully trusted, and the builders as well. And on the proposers, depending on where you execute, might be trustless, might also be trusted. Now, this is a battleground, and I think not many have experienced this. Keeping the builders in check, keeping the solvers in check, making sure that they're not front running you, that they're not moving against your intent, is a constant struggle. Like Meth Blocker, if you check their group chats, is constantly struggling to uncover who may be front run which transaction, is sending fake transactions in order to incentivize the builders not to abuse the information. So it's not an easy task, and there's a lot of cost to trusting each of these parties. You're basically constantly policing one way or another, and policing is never free. Now, this is a photo I took at a Thai pharmacy. Now, what could happen if you have a trusted supply chain? And I looked at this, and the pharmacist jumped straight into a explanation, fully convinced that 3% charge is justified and is necessary. And he literally told me, all of these people have to eat. So this is how you justify a 3% charge, and he printed and has like a plastic version of that on his table. ready to pitch anybody who questions why this has to be so costly. So this is one of the results of a trusted system, that if you have too many centralized parties and only trusted, then they can unilaterally extract or collude to your disadvantage and increase fees, for example. This is like one of the most likely consequences of centralization and having trusted actors. Now, what can TEEs, or well, let's just talk about TEEs. What can TEEs give us? I think one interesting, and this is probably not everything that TEEs can give us, but one aspect that I find quite interesting is that it can resolve all principal agent problems for all implementable agents. So because anything that you can implement, you can fully run trustlessly. And then you have no longer a principal agent problem, because the agent is running trustlessly and verifiably exactly what you told it to run. Now, of course, important implementable agents, right? You can't just eliminate all principal agent problems in the world. If somebody's doing a job that is not implementable because it's too complex, it's a human task. It's not so easy to do. You can't put that human into a TE or their brain, maybe soon. But this formulation gives me like a question, okay, what can we do to make more things implementable? And this is a task that we've been tackling for quite a while, which is to simplify the things that are currently complex. There is a lot of hidden complexity in the trade supply chain. One big example is indexing and simulating and executing over DEX equity is incredibly complex. I'm not going to go too much into that here, but trust me on that. It is a lot of work to implement every single protocol, every single curve pool, every single balancer pool, and all the other protocols. And this complexity leads to centralization. We can reduce a lot of that complexity by simply open sourcing, right? So if you take something that is very complex, as soon as if you can open source it, you can practically isolate all of that complexity. I mean, GEF in a way is the banking system, the bank settlement system, open sourced, and thereby made so simple that anybody can do it without knowing how to code, right? Anybody can run a validator. And so another way to simplify things is to standardize things, of course. Very important for decentralized systems to find, identify, and standardize widely used interfaces, often used interfaces. This is another thing that we've been working on. Also taking things that are done manually and automating, pretty trivial, and identifying mechanisms, part of mechanisms that really don't add any value to the overall objective. And this last one, I think, is quite important to always remember, because there's so many, even though we think we're innovating a lot, there's so many assumptions that we carry over from TradFi, and we just assume that, okay, order books are the way they are because somebody thought about it, and it must be. I find that behind a lot of these are actually assumptions that no longer hold in our systems, and you can remove these efforts. One example is latency wars. I think there's definitely ways, or I'm very hopeful that there are ways to remove most or almost all latency efforts or latency wars, and therefore all investment into latency optimizations, and which are ultimately kind of wasted and not adding value to the user. So overall topic, simplify what's complex so that you can then make it trustless in a TE. Now, what are some principal agent problems that we have? I think there's a long list, and you can probably come up with a lot more. One big one is maybe often overlooked. We're trusting the wallets, right? And we now more and more are trusting the wallets with the execution as well. They execute for us. And there are numerous ways in which they can use that position to earn revenues that at the end affect our settlement costs and increase them, and are incentivized to increase our settlement costs. So classical principal agent problem, we're trusting somebody and we have limited amount of resources and skills to police them. Auctions as well. Big problem is that we all know that, second price auctions have very attractive properties, and provably so, but we're not using second price auctions almost anywhere. Because why? Because we can't trust the auctioneer. They could put in shill bids, and then the second price auction falls apart. Same for building, solving, searching. I already mentioned that. So what can we build with TEs? This is non-exhaustive. It's just a tiny fraction of what you can build. So what we for example see is that our builder, being open source, enabled a TE builder, which enabled Bob, which is the back of block backrunner, built on together with the TE builder and TDX searcher that backruns the back of block. Super exciting implementation. You can similarly, if you have an open source solver, you can have a TE solver, and then you can have a TE solver builder who informs the solver about state updates so that there are no conflicts and settlements go through more reliably. You can think about having TE searchers that, or even TE66 ARP bots, TE solvers, trustless auctions, which gives you second price auctions. Because if you can trust the auctioneer being run exactly how it is and not being able to communicate information outwardly, then you can have second price auctions. And I think there's multiple stages in the trade supply chain where we could really use second price auctions, and it would simplify the lives of the auctioneers and the auction participants significantly. But there's much more. Also, we published this morning ERC 7815, which is a standard interface to DEX liquidity, enabled to make it super easy to index, simulate, and execute over DEXs, which makes it possible to actually have open source solvers, which then can be run on TEs. And Tyco is the interface that is basically the tool that runs the interface. So yeah, I'm not going to shill too much. Then this is just a brain teaser. I think we can maybe, if somebody has the will and interest to do this, we can work together on like a L2 beat for trustless trading, identify the parameters that are important, and then maybe put some awareness around which solutions satisfy which qualities. Maybe this is a more productive phrasing than who has the least MEV, because it's ultimately not very forward-looking and not very directive. It's just ex negativo, let's not have MEV. I think that gets boring also after a while, but there are other properties such as trustless quoting, sourcing, execution. I think they're quite important for a trustless trade supply chain. So if anybody wants to work on this, super happy to this is like a literally 5-minute thinking and run into this. So but I'm happy to work this out in more detail and have an L2 beat for trustless trade supply chains. So yeah, let's make this happen. If you want to work on standards, if you want to work on open sourcing parts of this trade supply chain, if you want to work on automation, don't talk to me about TEs. I think there's other people in this room. But yeah, reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss and find ways to decentralize the trade supply chain and make it trustless. Woo. Questions?
Yeah, I think we can answer a question or two.
Nice one.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could quickly explain what a second price auction is.
So in first price auction, I think, is the auction that we usually think about when we think about auctions. Everybody bids, and the person bidding the highest bid gets the item and pays what he bid. In a second price, the issue with this is that if you have a valuation of 120 and I have a value of 100, you don't know my valuation, you're not really incentivized to bid 120, right? Because you want to pay as little as possible. So you're actually incentivized to find out what my valuation is. And you have incentivized to invest a lot of resources into that. So in a second price auction, everyone bids and you pay, the winner pays the bid of the second highest bidder. And you can work this out rather simply that you are now incentivized to bid your true value, which simplifies it incredibly for you. And you bidding your true value is called incentive compatible. And yeah, overall, it's beautiful because it simplifies the auction and the energy invested by all participants.
How are you ensuring, instead of Tyco, if you're writing custom solidity for every single adapter, that it's not got a bug inside like GlueX? What happened?
So all of our execution contracts, so anything that touches assets, is audited by third parties. So we have a trail of bits auditor who's auditing every single deployment of every single adapter.
So I go today, I do a PR into Tyco. You're going to pay for the audit to get it checked in trail of bits. It's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yep.
Yep.
But that's what we do. We audit every single execution contract, right? It's indexing, simulation, execution.
Sure.
Indexing, simulation, okay. Worst that can happen is your trade fails. Execution, they're all audited.
Are there, in theory, alternative ways to solve this principal agent problem, or would you say TEES are the only way to sort of achieve this perfectly decentralized structure?
Or there are many other ways, right? We're doing it today. Right, you can just build incentives to, right? That's what we do with validators, right? With slashing. Slashing is a principal agent problem solution working with incentives. And I think mechanism design in many instances is about solving principal agent problems through mechanisms. Trustlessness is just quite of a cheat code. It gives you much of it for free, right? Incentives are they have limitations, right? But yeah, I would say, in other words, definitely incentives. But I'm not an expert on principal agent problems.
Just on that, is there a cost trade-off in a sense? Would you say that TEES have a cost, so they make it really cheap to solve it, but is there a hidden cost to it? I don't know. Have you thought about this at all? Or
But I think I'm not the right person to answer that. But yeah, there are other people who have deeper. But yes, there are costs, of course. I mean, but yeah, they're very efficient on the cost payoff trading curve. But yeah, I think others can talk about that more.
Another question. What's the end game then for solvers? So you're basically open sourcing your solvers, saying everyone add to this one. Everyone can kind of fork it, run it. Like, what's going to happen?
I think the end game for solvers is similar to the end game to the entire ecosystem, right? The end game is that we all spend time on adding value, right? And that you can think of, if you think of the entire tech resource tree as a fractal, right? You don't want to traverse from the center to the edge of the fractal. Like, this is wasted effort. So that's like the indexing that's already been done 20 times. What you want to do is that you traverse from the edge of the fractal into new untouched space. And so I think the end game is that you enable maximum innovation by having lowest barrier of entry. And then there's still a ton of work to do, right? I mean, in solving, there aren't enough solvers, right? Every auction is struggling to get enough solvers. And we're not even talking about the complex solving types and the multi-chain solving and all of that. So we need more people working on new innovations and not retracing the same effort as everybody else. So I think that the end game is maximally invest the time into new stuff. Everybody's working on something new, and that the smaller teams can contribute. I think but idealistically, single person engineers, experts in one area can meaningfully contribute to these competitive systems and don't have to integrate in-house infrastructure knowledge, indexing knowledge, node running, all of this, right?